Have you ever had a goal in life, taken steps to achieve that goal, and when you're close to the next step, been rejected? At that moment, it can feel really crappy, and of course, it's entirely possible to feel like a failure. But as the old saying goes, rejection or failure can often lead to a better path or opportunity if you keep going. Akira Toriyama was the very definition of that perspective that led to some of the greatest creations in anime, gaming, and himself became a trailblazer for generations of creatives behind him. Welcome to the Nerdy Magical Girl podcast, and today we are discussing the life and legacy of Akira Toriyama. Akira Toriyama was born April 5th, 1955 in Nagoya, Japan. From an early age, he had a keen interest in art and drawing. His childhood was filled with inspirations from manga, film, and many animated series, such as Asuma Tezuka's Astro Boy, published in 1952, and Disney's 1961 101 Dalmatians, and Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope in 1977. Having the father of manga, the mouse himself, Disney, George Lucas, and other inspirations fueled his passions for storytelling, world building, and illustration. In his early 20s, Toriyama found himself in the need of funds after quitting his job, and randomly, or maybe by fate, while in a coffee shop, saw an advertisement for Kodensha's weekly shonen magazine, promoting an amateur contest with a cash prize for the selected winner. While that particular contest did not align timing-wise with the submission date and deadline date being way too close, at the same time, Weekly Shonen Jump was accepting submissions for amateurs every month with a similar cash prize. So, Toriyama decided to enter. Toriyama's submission landed on the desk of none other than legendary editor Kazuhiko Torishima. While he enjoyed Toriyama's manga submission, it was marked ineligible because it was pretty much a Star Wars parody, and originality was what was being looked for in these entries. Also, you don't want to be sued by one of the biggest franchises to ever exist, so ultimately, that submission was rejected. And while Toriyama was a bit down after the rejection, he actually received a personal telegram from Torishima encouraging him to keep creating manga and to keep going and to keep sending him submissions. So he did, with Toriyama's first professional published work being Wonder Island in 1978. The story focuses on an ex-kamikaze pilot who crashed into the Pacific Ocean in 1944 during World War II, who eventually washes up on the shores of Wonder Island, a strange place where cavemen, fairies, vampires, and dinosaurs exist. Despite its detailed world building, character development, originality, Wonder Island actually placed last in Weekly Shonen Jump's readers survey. And remember, initially Toriyama's goal was to enter the manga contest to win money, but now he's not just in it for the money. Now he wants to win, especially after finishing in last place, unacceptable. Placing last in the survey motivated him to keep going, but still with full intention to quit manga after claiming that win and the money, which is such a fire sign thing to do. So he then created Wonder Island 2 in the same year, submitted it, and it was a flop too. So now he's mad because he's like, y'all are playing in my face. This is me interpreting Toriyama's words if he spoke like me. But he was steadfast and stubborn to claim a W because he knew his works were good. It was just a matter of getting that to translate into something that audiences would also connect with. And after failing again and again with flop after flop and creating over 500 stories for a year, he began to process the flops and learn from them. It's like what another old school saying says, quote, "We learn wisdom from failure much more than from success. We often discover what we will do by finding out what we'll not do. And probably he who never made a mistake never made a discovery." Samuel smiles. Now, around this time, after a year, after all of these flops, Torishima actually reached out to Toriyama again and said, hey, you should draw a manga with a female lead character. Now, if we remember from the History of Magical Girls episode, during the 1970s, the women's liberation movement was occurring in Japan, with women fighting for their rights loudly. Also, many male manga artists during this time were creating works with a younger female demographic in mind. even though their work was considered secondary to manga with a younger male audience in mind. Many could use girl comics to launch their career, and with notoriety, often shifted from girls comics to other demographics. Also remember, during the 1970s, Cutie Honey was a popular and controversial shonen manga and anime at the time that had a female lead, along with Chappie the Witch in 1972 and Meg the Little Witch in 1974 being popular shoujo manga and anime during this time. So with all of that going on in Japanese society and the rising popularity of quote-unquote girl comics, and the push from Toriyama to write a manga with a female lead, Akira Toriyama created a one-shot called Tomato the Cutesy Gumshoe in 1979. The story centers on a young, laid-back detective named Akira Tomato, who's on a police staff of all men, and also her partner Slump, who often makes fun of Tomato for her incompetence as a detective. But when she captures a known, wanted, and dangerous criminal, Akai gains the respect of her fellow officers. Now, Toriyama received some success from this publication, and feeling the air of success after so many losses, created another manga with a female lead called Dr. Slump in 1980, with Torishima as his editor. Set in Penguin Village, where humans and human-like animals and objects coexist, lives an inventor named Dr. Slump. Dr. Slump builds a perfect little girl robot and names her Areli Noramaki. Although Dr. Slump learns that Areli is far from perfect. Her eyesight is very poor and needs strong prescription glasses. And she's very naive, which leads to some comical adventures, accidents, and puns. Toriyama's career took off with the success of Dr. Slump manga and anime, making him a household name, giving him that solid W and money that he was looking for, with Dr. Slump selling over 30 million copies. So now that he has his W and his money, bro was still ready to be out. But Torishima encouraged him to do one more story. While looking for inspiration for this next story, Toriyama expressed frustration with his creative ideas and pitches not really connecting, and stated that he felt like he was fighting a villain in a kung fu movie. Kazuhiko Torishima knew that Toriyama enjoyed kung fu films, but to that point had not translated that into his manga. He suggested to Toriyama, why not try creating a kung fu manga? And in 1983, Toriyama's two-part story, Dragon Boy, was created, with its story centering on a martial artist on a mission to escort a princess on her journey back to her home country. But Toriyama's very next project in 1984 would change the world of manga and anime forever. In 1984, Akira Toriyama introduced the world to Dragon Ball. And while this series may not need an introduction to most, for new folks to anime or for folks who simply do not know, Dragon Ball was a groundbreaking series that followed the adventures of Goku, a young martial artist and seiyan with incredible powers, who was on a quest to find the mystical Dragon Balls. Dragon Ball became and is a cultural phenomenon, captivating audiences and new anime fans worldwide with its original and detailed storyline, dynamic fight scenes, and imaginative world building. From the beginning, Toriyama had a distinct art style and a knack for creating memorable characters. Again, it was just a matter of finding the lane that would translate and relate to audiences. Fun fact, Torishima was also the editor very early on for Dragon Ball as well. Dragon Ball was serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump from 1984 to 1995 and sold over 159 million copies in Japan alone. While that is a legendary feat all of its own, Toriyama was not done. He continued to extend into other forms of media such as anime movies, video games, and merch, reaching a worldwide audience and making his unforgettable mark on popular culture. A whirlwind of popularity with Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, which adapted the later chapters of Dragon Ball, Toriyama continued to produce one-shots and even at one point revived Dr. Slump, but ultimately having to end that story in the mid-1980s. However, also in the 1980s, Toriyama was recruited by Torishima to be the art designer on a video game called Dragon Quest, a role-playing game developed by Chunsoft and published by Enix for the NES. And Toriyama has worked on every installment installment in the Dragon Quest series to date. He was also a character designer in the critically acclaimed RPG Chrono Trigger and the Tobo fighting games. He continued doing one-shots, designed an electric car for CQ Motors, and was a consultant and later credited executive producer with 20th Century Fox for Dragon Ball Evolution, which I know people have mixed opinions about, and also worked with popular singers and nonprofits for commission projects, and was a strong advocate in protecting the environment. From animation to storytelling to world building, being an innovator, connecting people on a global scale with his creations, Akira Toriyama became as big as the giants that he grew up admiring and became an inspiration for the next generation of manga creators and artists to look up to. Without Dragon Ball, we would not have the big three, One Piece, Bleach, and Naruto, whose creators have always stated that Toriyama was one of their biggest inspirations. Heck, Naoko Takeuchi, the creator of Sailor Moon, and her husband Yoshihiro Togashi, the creator of Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter, admired Toriyama for all of his works.
見てしまいました。はい。先生にとって鳥山先生というのは、そうですね。まあ非常にありきたりですけど、まあ神なので、はい、天井人ですね。はい、やはりジャンプでやっていて鳥山先生がいなかったらもうおそらくここにもいないというぐらいもう影響も受け、そして、まあ目標ではないけれどもなるべく近づきたい存在。
All of these artists hold him in such high regard and respect that to this day they refer to him as sensei. Toriyama has inspired so many and will continue to do so for generations. We would not have the anime industry that we do today without Toriyama. So on March 1st, when it was announced that he died, it is understandable, considering the global and multi-industry impact he had on so many, why the world is grieving and hurting with his loss. I received a DM on Instagram of someone processing grief and asking, why does the death of somebody I never met in person affect him so much? And parasocially, Toriyama's creation shaped generations and shifted the anime industry. For many, Dragon Ball was their first anime or manga. So many anime fans, creators at a global level know, love, cosplay, and are inspired by Akira Toriyama's work. It shaped us as anime fans, and it all started with a rejection. If Toriyama had taken that initial rejection and multiple no's and flops and quit there would be no Goku. There would be no Big Three. There'd be no Jujutsu Kaisen. There would be none of it. Instead, he chose to keep going. Regardless of his motivations, and along that journey and change of course, he had people who believed in him and encouraged him along the way. A 23-year-old broke artist led to being a legend in his own right. Just like how Goku never gives up and has the support of people beside him on his journey, Toriyama was the living embodiment of that. While we as an anime community definitely have our differences, at large, we are still a community. For many, perhaps this is the first time you're processing a form of grief, even if it's parasocially. I want to encourage you to process and grieve in community. Talk to your friends and fellow anime lovers. Toriyama, the person, was extremely private, so don't be weird towards his family or anything like that. Like, please don't be weird. When Chadwick Boseman died, I genuinely cried and grieved. Never met the man in my life, but I believe everything that he stood for, especially when it came to uplifting Black artists and seeing him as Black Panther on the big screen, his philanthropy, parasocially, it had an impact on me. And the thing is too, it just felt so out of the blue, just completely out of left field. But that's the thing with death. It comes for all of us eventually. Thank you, Akira Toriyama, for never giving up, for blessing the world with your creations and inspiring so many anime fans around the world. Thank you for your invaluable lesson of not giving up and not letting rejection stopping you from achieving your goals. And may you rest in peace.